Hello, my name is Zach Gibbs, and I'm a content developer within education services inside Juniper Networks. And today we will be discussing the configuring gRPC JTI with AppFormix Learning Byte. Alright, so here is our example. In the example, we have the topology on the left, and we have a couple different nodes that I want to talk about. We have the AppFormix controller, and then we have the OpenStack node, which has the Contrail functions as well as the OpenStack functions. And then we have the two compute nodes, which house the vRouter functions. So that means that we'll have the VM instances on those compute nodes. And then we have the VMX device. And that VMX device is providing connectivity between Compute 1 and Compute 2. So that means it's providing connectivity for the VM instances that are on Compute 1 and Compute 2. So VMX is part of the underlay network. And so what we'll do is we'll configure VMX to talk with the AppFormix controller using gRPC JTI. And so we'll need to do a few things. We'll need to first configure the all file, and then we'll need to configure the network devices topology file. We'll also need to do some configuration on the VMX device. And then after we do that, we'll examine the VMX in the AppFormix user interface. And we'll be able to see the metrics that are being reported. And we will also be able to take a look at what the underlay topology looks like in the AppFormix user interface. So with that, let's go ahead and jump to the CLI and get this started. All right, so we'll begin with the VMX CLI. We'll have to check out a few things. Let's jump into configuration mode and look at the interfaces to begin with. And here we see a couple different interfaces. We have the GIGI00 interface and the GIGI001 interface. And how this works is the GIGI00 interface is pointing towards Compute 1 and the GIGI001 interface is pointing towards Compute 2. And then we have the FXP0 interface. That's the interface that we're going to use to first subscribe VMX using gRPC, and then we'll use that interface to send the gRPC information, the traffic, to the AppFormix controller. Now, if you're familiar with native JTI, you might look at this config and say, this is a problem if we're using native JTI. And if we were using native JTI, that would be correct. Because with native JTI, we can't use a management interface to send and receive information. But with gRPC, we can do that because gRPC happens in the routing engine. That communication comes from the routing engine. Whereas with native JTI, that information is exported as close to the source as possible, which is going to be in the data plane. So with this, we can have this be FXP0, which is the management interface, or we could have it be a data plane interface too that we're sourcing it from. Either way is perfectly fine with gRPC. So keep that in mind. This config looks great. So the other config that I want to show is, do we have netconf over SSH? And looking at this, we can see that we don't. We have to have that. That's what we need to have when AppFormix does the initial subscription with gRPC JTI. If we don't have netconf over SSH configured, things are going to fail. So let's go ahead and configure that now. And commit that configuration, if I could type commit. All right, so once that commits, we'll jump to the AppFormix CLI. Here is the AppFormix CLI, and we need to make some adjustments to the all file. And that's located in AppFormix inventory group vars. And we can edit the all file. And we need to add a few things here. In here, we need to add first a plugin that says it's the gRPC network device usage plugin. And so I'm just going to copy that from a file instead of attempting to type that all out. And so that's that plugin, that new plugin just added, gRPC network device usage plugin. And then we need to add the AppFormix network device monitoring enable parameters, set that to true. And I'm going to copy that as well, so I don't have to type all that out. Copy and paste it, that is. And then one last thing we need to add in, we need to reference that network device topology file. And again, I'm going to paste that in, and then we'll talk about it. So here we can see that we're referencing a file in the AppFormix inventory group vars directory, and that file's name is indevices-grpc.json. And that file is going to have the information on how things connect and what we're going to do, the different parameters we need. And we'll go into the specifics of that file next. So we'll just save this file. And then we will edit or examine the in-devices-grpc.json file. And of course, I could have just used cat instead of vi, but yeah, no, we're just going to jump into vi and take a look at things. Okay, so with this, there's a few different things we need to point out. Under the network device configuration, we have metadata, and then we have grpc config. Now under here, with the grpc config, we have to set the credentials, that's the username and password that we're going to be using to access the device. And then we have the device local port, that's the port we'll be communicating with. And then we have the sensor list. Now this sensor list is going to specify the different sensors that you want to monitor or the different sensors that you want to receive metrics from. And in here, we have resource and report rate for parameters. Under resource, we have the first one set to interfaces, the report rate set to 60, that's 60 seconds. Then we have another one that says resource components, resource rate 45, so 45 seconds. And so with that, it's very important that you spell the resource exactly how it's supposed to be. You can find out the different resources that are available on Juniper's website, so keep that in mind. And then, of course, you have to specify the report rate, so this is how often the VMX device will be reporting metrics. So with the first resource, which is the interfaces resource, will be reporting every 60 seconds, and the components resource will be reporting every 45 seconds. Now, the other thing I do want to point out is pay special attention to the syntax here. This is in JSON format, and so there is going to be comma delimiters at certain points, and there won't be at other points. And so keep that in mind. If you're having a problem creating this file in your own setup, there's different syntax checkers out there that are online that you can use that will check the syntax for you. So keep that in mind. That's something I struggled with a little bit at first, trying to do this on my own. Those online syntax checkers helped tons. So keep that in mind. Okay, so management IP, that's the IP address that we're going to be using to communicate with VMX, or that the AppFormix controller will be using to communicate. And when AppFormix sends traffic or sends the metrics to the AppFormix controller, it'll use that IP address. Okay, the name VMX, that's going to be just unique to the system. Source, now this is very important. We need to specify a source of user.grpc. That tells the system that we are going to be using grpc. And then the network device ID, that's going to be unique to the AppFormix controller. That's what will show up in the GUI. And then we have the chassis type. There's a couple different chassis types you can select. Here we're just selecting core switch. Again, that is just something that the AppFormix controller needs to know, so when it builds out the topology, it knows what to do. And then we have the connection info. Here in the connection info, we have some manual mappings on how the interfaces line up. And so with this, we have two different interfaces that we're concerned about. We have the GIGI 000 interface and the GIGI 001 interface. And what we do in this connection info section is we specify the local interface. For example, in the first part, we say local interface GIGI 000. Then we specify the remote interface, and that's going to be the interface that it connects to on the remote system, which in this case is ENS 160. And then we specify the remote system ID, which in this case is compute 1. So what's happening here is VMX is connecting to compute 1 using GIGI 000, and the interface on compute 1 is ENS 160. Now we do that for the next connection. We have the local interface set to GIGI 001. That means VMX GIGI 001 is connecting to compute 2. And compute 2 is using ENS 160 to connect to VMX. Okay, so let's continue on. Let's get out of the VI editor. And so the next thing we need to do is we need to run the OpenStack Ansible Playbook again. And what that'll do is the OpenStack Ansible Playbook will reference the all file, which then references the network topology file, and it'll add those additional parameters and pull that information for VMX and get that going with gRPC. Now, the one thing I do want to point out that I didn't say earlier is we were manually specifying the connection info. You can do that automatically with AppFormix. It uses LLDP and SNMP to do that. And so that's an option, but I wanted to show the manual way here first because the automatic way is pretty straightforward. You don't have to specify certain parameters and worry about syntax, so just keep that in mind. There is an automatic way to do that. So if you have a huge underlay network, you don't have to go through and manually set every single connection, which might not scale too well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get that script going. The first thing we need to do, though, go to the AppFormix directory, and we need to use the source command to set the environmental parameters or the environmental variables. And so that is going to be the source demo openrc.sh command. That demo VMX-openrc.sh is a file that I pulled from OpenStack and asked for a password. And this is the password that we're going to be using to access the OpenStack controller. So keep that in mind, AppFormix is going to reach out to the OpenStack controller to get the environmental variables that OpenStack has. And then what we can do is we can check that out, see what variables are set. Now this is very important because you want to make sure you have the right variable set. I had to type that password there. I might have messed it up. So you can see here under the OS password equals Contrail. Now that's what I'm expecting to see. So keep that in mind. This is in plain text, so be careful of who's looking over your shoulder here. And so the next thing we need to do is we need to go to the images, AppFormix folder, and under here we need to run the Ansible Playbook. And this will take about 5 minutes to run, so I'm going to pause the video, and after this is done running and complete successfully, I'll start the video back up and we can jump back into checking the AppFormix user interface to see how this works. All right, so it looks like things have completed there. The script ran successfully, so let's go ahead and jump to the AppFormix user interface. Okay, so here is the AppFormix UI, and under the physical infrastructure, we can see that there is one network device. That's what we want to see. That means that the VMX device has been added successfully. Okay, we can click it, we can see some information about it. Let's click on VMX1. And find out more info about it. And here we can see that everything looks good. Health and risk states are good. We can see the management IP. We can see the source is user.grpc. That's perfect. That's what we want to see. And then let's click on the charts shortcut button. All right, so here is the charts workspace. We can see here that we are receiving metrics from the VMX device. That's perfect. That's what we want to see. So now let's go ahead and jump to the network topology and look to see how things are connected. So in the network topology workspace, we can see that we are using the underlay section, and there's an overlay and underlay, and we're concerned about the underlay network because that's what VMX is a part of. So we need to click on the cluster, and then we can zoom in. We can see VMX here. We can click it and find out some more information. We can see that Gigi000 is connecting to ENS 160 of Compute 1, and we can see that Gigi001 is connecting to ENS 160 of Compute 2. We can also click on the instances and find out more information about the different instances and what's connected to what. And so we can see here that the VMX device was added correctly and is reporting metrics using GRPC. So that brings us to the end of this learning byte. We discussed how to configure GRPC JTI, and we demonstrated how to verify GRPC JTI usage. So as always, thanks for watching.
Visit the Juniper Education Services website to learn more about courses. View our full range of classroom, online, and e-learning courses. Learning paths, industry segment and technology-specific training paths. Juniper Networks Certification Program, the ultimate demonstration of your competence. And the training community, from forums to social media. Join the discussion.